Hey guys, it is time for another Spotlight On, and this time I wanted to talk about an author, specifically Randall Munroe. And so for this video, I'm going to introduce you to Randall Munroe, who he is, and how he's known, and then we'll talk about each of the three books that he has written, and then I'm going to explain why I love them so much. And so let's start with who is Randall Munroe. So Randall Munroe is actually better known as a web comic artist. He created the web comic XKCD. And obviously I have the book, but they're all available online at the website xkcd.com. And they're stick figures. I'm sure most people on the internet have seen an XKCD comic, even if they didn't know that that's what it was. But it is a web comic that is about science and life and love and sarcasm and the absurdities of life. And a lot of people really related to that. He's been doing this a really long time. The website, I believe it was started in 2005. I know that I found it somewhere prior to 2008. I can absolutely date it back to at least 2008. So it's been around for a really long time, internet speaking, or at least, in terms of how long the internet's been around as well. And so he has a lot of comics out there, and some of them are more science-based, some of them are much more about commenting on life, but there's something there for everyone. So he has actually written 3 books, and the first one actually came out of a side project he was doing on the XKCD website, where people would ask these really weird questions, just kind of absurd ridiculousness, and he would sit down and puzzle it out through, figure out the science for it, figure out the answer through this science, and then write it up and post it as an essay on like a blog type thing. And it was and of course it was so interesting, and there was such a good reception for it, because obviously, first of all, you're intrigued by the questions that other people come up with, but also it was very scientifically sound, and it was like you're treating this very strange question with utmost sincerity and seriousness, and it works. Like, or at least your answer is like I said, it's scientifically sound. And so when he got enough people on board with that, he actually wrote a book, What If? Serious Scientific Answers to Absurd Hypothetical Questions. And it is a book that is really just a bunch of essays, where it's a question that somebody has posed, and he wrote an essay using science to answer it. So, okay, the question, which U.S. state is actually flown over the most? And he takes oh my goodness, like 4 pages to answer the question. Or what if I jumped out of an airplane with a couple of tanks of helium and one huge uninflated balloon? Then while falling, I release the helium and fill the balloon. How long of a fall would I need in order for the balloon to slow me enough that I could land safely? Now, again, we're back, and then he takes like 2 pages and answers it in a scientific manner. So again, we're back to it's partially interesting because you want to see what questions other people are coming up with, but also, again, he's taking it very seriously and answering it very scientifically. And then the second book actually came out of a webcomic that he did. I don't remember what he called it, but I remember it as like U.S. Space Teams Upgoer 5, I think. Anyway, it was a diagram of a rocket. And when you have the diagrams, you have all the lines pointing to all the different parts, and then like these little descriptions. And he did that, but in the descriptions, usually it's very jargon filled. And for him, he made a challenge for himself that he could only use the 1,000 most popular English words. And I was just like, and so he ended up having to do things like Upgoer 5, right? Like he couldn't use NASA, he couldn't do any of this stuff. And so that's why it's US Space Team Upgoer 5. And it it was very interesting because, we have gotten to this point where science is very, very jargon filled. And he said, well, what if we take all the jargon out of it? Every single bit, definitively, because it's only the 1,000 most common words. And he did this diagram. And it was so well received that he ended up doing an entire book of scientific diagrams where the descriptions only use the 1,000 most commonly used English words. And it's just like, oh my goodness. It'll be like this one, which is a lifting room, or, an elevator. And how does an elevator work? But again, only using the 1,000 most common words. And so I thought that was really interesting, just because, like, again, we're living in a very jargon-filled world, and he just straight up took that out. And then the last book that he has is actually one that I do not own because it came out in September, and I just haven't gotten my hands on it yet. But it is called How To: Absurd Scientific Advice for Common Real World Problems. And the description part, at least part of the description, is: for any task you might want to do, there's a right way, a wrong way, and a way so monumentally complex, excessive, and inadvisable that no one would ever try it. How To is a guide to the third kind of approach. It's full of highly impractical advice for everything from landing a plane to digging a hole. And then it goes on, and then near the end it says, and if you want to get rid of the book once you're done with it, Munroe walks you through your options for proper disposal, including dissolving it in the ocean, converting it to vapor, using tectonic plates to subduct it into the Earth's mantle, or launching it into the sun. And again, he's playing with science. And I know that it's going to be very scientifically sound. I obviously haven't read it, but I know it's going to be scientifically sound because he is a scientist. A lot of the people who consume his work are science minded and would definitely have something to say if there were problems with the science. So those are the books that he has written. And why I love them so, so much is because in this first question, again, people are asking just completely ridiculous questions, even maybe to try to trip him up. And he's taking it very seriously and puzzling through the science and figuring out what the actual answer is, as much as he can tell anyway. And I love it because at that point you're saying, like, science can answer all these weird questions that we have. Why does this thing do this? And, there are people that'll ask that question, and sometimes the response is like, who cares? But, like, why wouldn't we answer that question? There's so much that can be explained through science, or maybe not explained, but like answered. And then again, I love it. I love Thing Explainer because, again, it's scientifically minded, but it's looking at jargon and what happens, like, when you use jargon. Or I guess it's more saying when you use jargon, sometimes you lose people. So let's take out the jargon fully. Now, it is a little bit hard to read because, because you're very, very limited in your word usage. You have to use those words in a slightly unusual way. And so now, like, the reader kind of has to translate. And so it took the pendulum, like, if the pendulum was over here with all this jargon, Randall Munroe swung it all the way over to the other end. And so, but it makes it very accessible to anybody, because if you don't know how an elevator works, he's got you covered. Like, and you don't have to know any specific jargon to understand it. And then again, with How To, we're like talking about, very simple real world problems that we already have, the common answers. And he's looking at it like, what about the absurd answer? And then again, scientifically, would you legitimately, how would you do that? How would you go about this really absurd solution to your very easy problem? And I love it. It's a love letter to all the different things that science can do. And it's saying science is for everyone. Science answers, yes, science is serious. Science answers serious questions that do have a huge impact on our life, as it should. But also, science can answer all those really ridiculous questions. It can give you these impractical solutions. We can talk about how things work, and I just love that. It His sense of whimsy, and he has this sense of whimsy, and then he says, let's be scientific about the whimsy. And that is such an interesting way of going about it. So I like I said, I love it. If you're listening to this and going like, but I'm not a science person, neither am I. I was a math person, and for some reason it just didn't translate. So my foundation for science is, let's call it shaky, okay? Like it's not good. It's not a strong foundation. But I found that yes, there were a few points where I didn't 100% understand what was going on, but for the most part I found it very, very accessible, and that I did get what he was saying. And I think that that's also a huge strength to his books. So that's it, guys. I think that you should check out Randall Munroe. He's got 3 different books. Whatever you're interested in, whether it's absurd questions or absurd answers, or like technical specs that are not necessarily easy to understand, but at least don't have jargon to make you feel stupid. That's what he's got. And then of course, if you're interested in his webcomic, you should definitely go check that out too. If you like Randall Munroe, if you go check out his stuff, please let me know. I love his stuff, and I don't always find it, especially in book communities that are more like fantasy or science fiction or anything. But yes, come talk to me. But that's all I have, you guys. So until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.